Well, it is now officially spring, but here in Massachusetts, it hasn't exactly been the long, cold, and snowy winter that New England is known for. In fact, this winter tied with the 2015-2016 winter as the state's warmest on record. That's according to the National Centers for Environmental Information. And between December and February, temperatures averaged just below 34 degrees, up nearly 8 degrees from last century. So record-breaking warm winter days have raised the alarm bells over the past few months and are part of a bigger, more alarming trend. A new report out of the UN is issuing perhaps the most dire climate change warning yet, estimating the world will likely surpass a dangerous and irreversible temperature threshold in the next decade. So the report warns that heat waves, droughts, wildfires, flooding, and tropical storms will become more common and more extreme. In addition to worsening natural disasters, the rising temperatures are also expected to exacerbate a number of health conditions and further limit access to food, water, and housing. And we are running out of time to reverse these trends, or the UN Secretary General put it,
humanity is on thin ice, and that ice is melting fast.
it is a frightening scenario, but there is still some time left to act here. So what can we do to prevent this from becoming a reality as a country, as a city, and as everyday citizens? To discuss this, I'm joined now by Reverend Mariama White Hammond, Boston's Chief of Environment, Energy, and Open Spaces, and Patrick Kinney, a professor of environmental health at Boston University School of Public Health. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having
Thank you for
us.
having me.
Yeah. So, Professor Kinney, I want to start with you. This is the most dire warning that the UN has actually put out yet. So break that down for us, because I think we're talking about a matter of 1 or 2 degrees, but that can make a huge impact.
Yeah, it's 1 or 2 degrees on the average, but the extremes are really where the impacts are. And as you noted, this past winter has been a really extreme for us, and we've been really experiencing the reality of climate change over the last few years. It's really, though, a trend that's been occurring over about the last 50 years. Scientifically, we can see the trend in the data, but now it's really becoming very tangible. And so I think this report, it's a series of reports, but this latest one really is the most dire and strident in its impact, I hope. And I think the urgency is great. And so I hope this report gets people's attention and really helps us double down on the action that needs to be done to address this problem.
Yeah, what was something that maybe particularly stood out to you? I mean, you've been obviously looking at the data for a number of years, but this particular report, I imagine, highlighted some areas that we really need to be focused on.
Well, there are many. Locally, we experience extreme heat in the summertime, causing excess mortality and morbidity. And we've done some studies at our Center for Climate and Health recently that show that children are especially vulnerable to extreme heat. There's something like 12% of emergency department visits in the summertime are caused by extreme heat nationwide. So those are some of the findings that we're seeing. But I think the report really also emphasizes a really important point, which is that the people that are most affected by climate change are generally the people that have been least responsible for causing the problem. So there's really an important sort of equity issue here as well.
Yeah, and Reverend White Hammond, I know that you've been working in community on issues involving the climate, but also the rising heat, especially in urban areas. What are you seeing in terms of this impact, at least most recently?
Yeah, so I mean, I think I grew up in Boston, and I lived on the third floor of a old home with no air conditioning. And so as a young person, I remember this, relying on that small fan. But it's things like, I don't feel like my parents could sustain themselves without having air conditioning units, because it's not safe at their age. They're healthy folks, but the reality is that our seniors and our young people are the folks that are having the hardest time being able to regulate temperatures. We had a grandmother come and testify at one of our hearings, a grandmother from Chinatown, whose granddaughter fainted. And she said, that's not supposed to happen. I'm not supposed to have to worry that my granddaughter can't be outside. So the effects are tangible for everybody. People who work outside, for instance, are extremely vulnerable. Folks who have any kind of health conditions or particularly respiratory conditions, which unfortunately, because of the advent of COVID-19, you're seeing even more people that have sort of long COVID symptoms. So the reality is the effects are not just, more deserts in Northern Africa. The effects are happening right here in the city. I grew up in one of our heat islands, and I live in another one of our heat islands. I am thankful at this point in my life to have central air conditioning, but I know what it is not to have that. And for some of our communities, that can literally be a major health threat and drive people to the emergency room. In the most extreme cases, leading to people dying younger than they have to.
I want to point out we have some numbers on the average temperature here in the Bay State in Massachusetts from 2018 to 2022 from the National Centers for Environmental Information. And you can see from 2018 to 2022, we're talking about 49.5 degrees in 2018. And then that rising to 50.4 degrees when we're talking about a specific range there. Again, we're talking about degrees, but the impact, Professor Kinney, ends up being larger. And the scientific community has rung this bell before, and many times.
Yeah, that's for sure. The scientific community has been talking about this for decades, really. And it's been frustrating how slow the progress has been. Over the last decade or so, I think the progress has been especially promising at the level of cities and regions, and Boston's been one of the leaders in climate action, at least setting goals for climate action. Federally, it's been much slower until recently with the Inflation Reduction Act, and really, which is a climate act in many ways. So there's some trends moving in the right direction. It's taken longer than it should have, and I'm just hopeful that we can really act quickly over the next decade or so, as this report is telling us we need to avert the worst consequences. I mean, during our lifetimes, it's going to get worse, but it's going to be especially challenging for our children and their children. And so what we do now really will have a huge impact on their lives. And I think it's important for us to really take this seriously.
I'm interested about what you said about how the Inflation Reduction Act is really a climate matter, and I'd love to hear more about that as we are talking about interest rates today and the Fed raising them.
Mm-hmm. I didn't get a chance to hear the news. How much did they raise them by?
You put me on the spot a little
Okay.
bit, but they've risen it to some degree.
Okay,
yeah,
good.
yeah.
Okay.
But talk to me about this correlation between that and the climate.
The Inflation Reduction Act has a lot of incentives for going green, and in terms of reducing fossil fuel burning, and incentives for electric vehicles, charging infrastructure, that sort of thing. And so I think, and it might seem ironic in a way that we're suggesting people move to more electricity, because a lot of electricity is generated using fossil fuels, but more and more it's not. More and more we're getting our electricity from renewable sources, and cheap solar electricity is becoming way more available. So the move to electricity is really important, and it's going to reduce our impact on the climate. But more importantly, or as importantly, locally, the air quality is going to improve, and that's going to make everybody healthier.
And I do know we my Cracker Jack team were able to look it up. It is 0.25%. So the Fed raised the interest rate 0.25%, and that's despite all of the other mitigating factors. So we do know that tonight. Reverend White Hammond, we spoke about the big health impacts and also what the city has been working toward to sort of mitigate the impact of climate change. And I'm always thoughtful when we have this conversation, not only of those heat islands, but of the seaport and the rising water of the seaport.
Yeah, so I think we have a number, Boston is the fourth most vulnerable city to climate change in the United States. And that's because we have 47 miles of coastline. And each of them, all along each stretch, we've already done the work to sort of map where our flood pathways are and really think about how we need to close those. In some instances, we've gotten started. We've looked at places that we own the land. For instance, if you go to the North End, Papalo Langoni Park, that is a park that we owned, and we use the opportunity of redesigning that park to raise the seawall, but also to make that part of a baseball field and bocce courts and all of those things. So people will enjoy it, but it's also providing them protection from sea level rise. But I think, going back to the Inflation Reduction Act, the reality is what this IPCC report says is we need a full economy transformation, and we needed it yesterday, but we've got to drive to it today with urgency. And I think part of what makes, particularly Mayor Wu is part of that younger generation that has grown up with the reality of climate change. And they are saying to us, we need you to take action now, because it's going to be even worse for us. And our children are not even guaranteed the kind of basic security that we've come to rely on. And so this question of how do we transform our economy? Because right now our economy is driven by fossil fuels. And if we keep being driven by fossil fuels, we know where we're headed. That's what the reports tell us. We are headed to an unimaginable and dangerous future. But I think one of the exciting pieces of that is that full economy transformation is at the heart of this idea behind the Green New Deal, that we could address environmental issues at the same time that we transform our economy. And in doing so, we can lift up many of our communities that have been left out of the economy as it is right now. Earlier, I think just yesterday, we had a program that we started in Boston, Power Corps, which replicates a program started in Philadelphia that's taking young people from some of our more economically disadvantaged neighborhoods, Dorchester and Roxbury and East Boston, and training them in cutting edge green jobs. And so they're learning how to do what they call smart building technology. How do you really increase the efficiency of a building so that it needs less energy? We want to make sure that it's using renewable energy. But the first way to address our climate crisis is to use less energy, and then to make sure that that energy is as green as possible. So I just got off the phone with some folks at the Federal Reserve who have a Power Corps intern. They're learning how their buildings work and learning how that young person can be part of this green revolution and make sure that the Fed building is as efficient as it possibly can be, that it's turning off the lights when they need to, that it's making sure that the heating and cooling match what's actually needed, and not those situations that many of us experience, especially as women, where we're wearing, a parka jacket in the middle of the summer because the air condition is a little bit too high. So there are all of these ways that we can address this crisis in a way that lifts up communities that have not contributed to this in nearly the same way, and making sure that they can enter the economy and feed their families and do well. So we are not choosing between economic justice and environmental justice. Those two things are inextricably linked together.
Yeah, and Professor Kinney, when people ask you this question, what can we do? What can I do to help, whether it's affect change in my carbon footprint, whether it's recycle more, whether it's, what can a person at home do that may be watching this to help reverse what we're seeing in the climate?
Yeah, to really take the greatest action against climate change as an individual, we need to figure out ways to reduce our own carbon footprints. And that means stop burning as much fossil fuels. And the achievability of that ambition varies. Some things are expensive to do, but if you're driving a gas-powered car, trying to see how you can end up getting an electric vehicle is would make a big benefit. If you have a home
or take the T.
Excuse me?
Or take the T.
I said, or take
well,
the T.
I was going to say, yeah, public transportation is the other thing, and we should be really advocating for the T to transform all of its fleet to electric vehicles. including the commuter rail, because there's a lot of pollution that's being generated by those vehicles. But getting people into those vehicles is a good thing for the environment, even with fossil fuel, because you burn a lot less in a bus than you do driving your own vehicle. So those are, public transportation, conversion to electricity, and also in the home heating, we're going to have to move our homes towards electric heat as well, which is going to be a challenge economically as well as from a technological point of view. But the technology is there, and there's some incentives in this new Inflation Reduction Act for converting to these heat pumps, which a lot of people are starting to do. I think homeowners can do that, but also I think tenants need to advocate for landowners to start doing that as well. And there need to be more incentives at the local level to make that happen quickly. It has to happen fast, really over the next decade.
And I think the T piece is so important as we sort of continue to call for the T to be more efficient, to run on time. I mean, frankly, and I think to be a reliable source so that folks can use that rather than drive into the city and have those issues. And I think about that in your community work, Reverend White Hammond, when we talk about a reliable T in public transportation as what everyday folks who maybe don't have the income to purchase an electric vehicle can do to reduce their carbon footprint.
Yeah, so I am a T rider. I took it in this morning. I take it most days. And I think, we all need to be in it together advocating for the resources the T needs to function well for us all. I do want to offer one other thing that folks can do. If you are a Boston resident, we have a program called Boston Community Choice Electricity. And this is a program that will help you not just go green, but also save you money. The standard rate in the city, the standard rate on Eversource is about 25 cents a kilowatt hour. Our 100% green energy is only 14 cents a kilowatt hour. And that's because we negotiated those rates in a 3-year contract. So we hope that people will, one, consider switching over to community choice energy. And then if you're already on community choice electricity, that you would consider opting up. The standard rate is 11 cents a kilowatt hour, and that's 30% green. But we know that there's more of us that can afford to do 14 cents. I know that there are some people who need the lowest they possibly can. But if you got a little bit left over at the end of the month, thinking about how you can join a 100% green energy program. And so you can find that you can call 311 in the city of Boston. You can also find that in the boston.gov/BCCE. And I also want to note, there are many other cities and towns that also have this program. It may not be the same exact as ours, and the rates are slightly different, but many of them are cheaper than the standard rate, and they give you an opportunity to support moving more of our electricity green.
All right, great. Well, we're going to have to leave the conversation there. Reverend Mariama White Hammond and Patrick Kinney, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.